call to order the Village of Hinsdale Board of Trustees meeting for August 15th. Is it August 15th? No. September 15th. September 5th, 2023. Please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item up, because I had the minutes in front of me, is the minutes of the August 15th, 2023 meeting. Can I have a motion with respect to those minutes?
Move to approve the minutes of the Board of Trustees meeting of August 15, 2023.
Second.
Any changes? Hearing none?
Sorry,
Sure.
I have one change.
Sure.
So, on item A on the second page, the departments, we did have to move things from one department to another. The funds are unchanged. My suggested changes would be in the fifth line where it says department, we change that to funds. And then in the second to last full line, we would say the ordinance reallocates amounts between line item accounts in funds in order to balance the line item appropriations.
Everybody, did you get that?
I'll give it to you.
Any other changes? Hearing none, can I have a roll call vote?
Trustee Postma?
Aye.
Trustee Braden?
Aye.
Trustee Siffler?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher? Trustee Burns?
Aye.
Trustee Green?
Aye.
President's report, the Hinsdale Community Pool is closed for the season. Hinsdale Parks and Recreation's Fall 2023 Recreation Program Guide is now available, and registration is open. For more information and a digital program guide, please visit the Parks and Recreation Department website. The Hinsdale Historical Society is hosting an event. Was it Chateau du Parc? Did I say that right? At 420 South Park Avenue on October 5 from 6 to 9 p.m. The event celebrates the 100th birthday of this newly restored home. Tickets will be purchased at the Historic Society's website. Now we have citizens petitions. Anybody in the audience who wants to speak on any matter on or off the agenda. If it's a matter on the agenda, it may make sense to wait till we take up the matter, but you're free to talk now if you like. Anybody have anything? There's another opportunity at the end of the meeting. Okay, that takes us to the first read. I think that's you, Neil.
Yes. Okay, item 6A is for design, engineering, and construction observation for the road improvements in 2024. Since a large portion of next year's road work will involve East 6th Street, we will only be doing asphalt resurfacing on a few roads. I met with public service and engineering departments, and we selected the following candidates for resurfacing. South Monroe Street from 6th to 8th, 5th Street from Lincoln to Garfield, Quincy from North to Hickory, South Bowden Street mid-block. There's like a low point in the mid-block, a settlement, so we're just going to fix that part of it. And then the VEC parking lot. These streets were selected based on their overall condition and volume of traffic carried. Also in the case of South Monroe, the portion from 6th to 7th is in very poor condition, while the portion from 7th to 8th is not as bad, but will be in a few years. It's our policy that once we have all the resurfacing equipment at a particular street, it's good and more economical to continue resurfacing for another block rather than only do one block at a time. There are some other streets in the village that are in poor condition, but fewer and fewer every year, but this is as much as we can do in 2024. Any questions on that?
No, we put it on consent? Consent
Consent?
agenda? Yep. Okay.
Okay, and then 6B, this has to do with a proposal we got for the pedestrian pass that's going to connect the parking deck with First Street, and we got a bid on it, and it was just very, very high, and we just don't think it's. We think we can do better next year. We bid it out at a different time, so we'd like to reject that.
What did we expect it? What was your guess? What did you think it was going to come in at?
I think it was budgeted for, I think,
50,000 budgeted?
There's a grant for 50.
Yeah.
I think the engineer's estimate was like close to where this bid came in. We only got one bid, so we wanted to see kind of what the market
Okay,
was.
thank you.
So we would reject this and put it out for bid next year again?
Yes,
Correct.
There's no urgency to doing this.
right.
I think that's a consent agenda item.
Okay, and then item 6C is to award a contract to design and build a new exhaust system for the police station gun range. Some background here is that when our officers do shooting at the gun range, highly toxic lead is emitted, when the guns are fired, and this must be exhausted to avoid personnel exposure. The present system is over 20 years old and is inoperable. I toured it with Chief King last week, and it looks more like 120 years old. Currently, when officers need to do weapon certification, which they have to do 2 to 3 times per year, they have to use ranges. Now that the system is inoperable, they have to use ranges in other villages and fit into those villages' schedules. I asked Chief King if it was feasible and/or practical to continue to use other ranges at other villages, kind of like what we're trying to do with the fire department, fire equipment. But we concluded after talking about this is that with everything going on these days, and I don't have to tell you what's all going on, our police department is pretty busy, and the last thing they need to do is call around to schedule gun range time and then drive to it. Some of these gun ranges may be in Lamont or something. So we're much better off having this capability in-house. The good news is the police department received a grant from the Illinois Secretary of State's office in the amount of $250,000 to be used for gun range ventilation improvements. So basically, that's going to pay for that. So with this contract award, Christopher Burke Engineering will design the new system and develop suitable bid documents, and we'll see to the installation of the new unit.
From my notes, I think we're out of pocket like $9,000
$9,000, yeah.
for this whole thing. Okay.
We can cover that.
Yeah, yeah,
And the 9's already been spent, right?
Yes.
Is that-
yeah.
Correct.
And the 250 grant is already in-house. We've already received that, too.
Correct.
Right. So we're all set.
Easy.
Yep,
Okay, and that's that.
consent agenda item. Okay, that takes us to the consent agenda items. So first two had the accounts payable.
And that was me too.
Okay.
So I found everything to be in order, and I'm going to move to approve payment of the accounts payable for the period of August 10th, 2023 through August 30th, 2023 in the aggregate amount of $1,477,039.27 as set forth on the list provided by the village treasurer, of which a permanent copy is on file with the village clerk.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Trustee Pashima?
Aye.
Trustee Braden?
Aye.
Trustee Stifler?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher? Trustee Burns?
Aye.
Trustee Banky?
Aye.
Okay, that takes us to consent agenda items B through F, and unless somebody wants to pull an item off the consent agenda item, can I have a motion for 7B through 7F?
Move to approve consent agenda items 7B through 7F.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Trustee Pashima?
Aye.
Trustee Braden?
Aye.
Trustee Stifler?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher? Trustee Burns?
Aye.
Trustee Banky?
Aye.
So Matt, to you, section 8?
Yes. Let's see, so item A, this is something that we do every year in connection with our audit, where we approve a transfer ordinance that allocates amounts from line items where we didn't exceed the limit to line items where the amounts were in excess of what had been approved. The total amount approved for each fund does not change, but we're moving things between different line items, as I was talking about in the minutes. But there's no change to the village budget whatsoever. It's more of an accounting thing that's required by state law in connection with adoption of appropriations. Any questions?
Want to make a motion?
Yep. So I'll move to approve an ordinance authorizing transfers of appropriations within departments and agencies of the village.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Trustee Pashima?
Aye.
Trustee Braden?
Aye.
Trustee Stifler?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher? Trustee Burns?
Aye.
Trustee Banky?
Aye.
So then 8B is a little more atypical due to a clerical error the correct amounts were not appropriated for two of the funds. The foreign fire insurance tax fund, we need to appropriate another $9,692. There was additional revenue in 2022 of $11,298, which is more than the amount that we need. And then the second item is where we didn't have the correct amount was the police pension fund. That amount is $45,542, and there we're going to be taking those amounts from the fund balance reserve. So we're going to be adopting a supplemental appropriation ordinance for these two numbers, but again, no impact on the village budget. Any questions? Okay, then I will move to approve an ordinance making supplemental appropriations for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2022.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Trustee Pashma?
Aye.
Trustee Braden?
Aye.
Trustee Stifler?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher? Trustee Burns?
Aye.
Trustee Benke?
Okay, the next item, 8C, this is a second read due to time sensitivity. It's increasing the blanket purchase order for East Avenue Lacrosse from $40,000 to $70,000. East Avenue contracts with the village to provide lacrosse programming for kindergarten through 7th grade. The village receives 100% of the registration fees and then pays East Avenue 65% of those fees. So there's no out-of-pocket cost to the village. The program has actually been very successful, and we've already paid East Avenue a little over $40,000 based on about $63,000 in revenue, and so we're going to be increasing the purchase order to provide for the additional fall programming that East Avenue is going to provide. Mike, do you have anything else to add here?
No, that's it.
Okay, great. No impact on the budget, obviously, because of how these contracts work. Any questions?
Nope.
And so, like I said, this is a second read due to time sensitivity because of the fall programs coming up with East Avenue. So I will move to approve the increase of a blanket purchase order from $40,000 to the amount of $70,000 for East Avenue Lacrosse for recreation programming services.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Trustee Pashma?
Aye.
Trustee Braden?
Aye.
Trustee Stifler?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher? Trustee Burns?
Aye.
Trustee Benke?
Aye.
Okay, the next item, this is 8D, is relating to the issuance of B2 and B4 liquor licenses to K-Miso at 114 South Washington. This is the previous location of Sauced. The K-Miso is going to get the same liquor licenses as Sauced had. B2, which relates to sale of alcohol for consumption on site, and then B4 relates to the sale of packaged liquors that can be taken off-site. Technically, the way our code works is that when a business that has liquor licenses closes, the number of licenses that the village is able to grant decreases, so then you have to increase again the number of licenses and then move to award those to K-Miso. Are you from?
I'm Gregory Meisen. Yep. I'm one of the principals of Hot Taco, and just here for any questions, just to make sure take care of what you guys are worried about.
Not sure we'll worry about anything.
Yeah.
No,
Let's keep it that way.
if you can do some of that Department of Health, they're just making it tough on us. But.
Still mid-September opening? Maybe?
Okay, we're waiting on Department of Health, and we're finalizing some of the certification and safety issues to have that issued, which is the preliminary to get the final building permit issued, and then the CO so that we can open. But it was light modifications to things as far as that. We connected the two spaces of the building to make it a cohesive restaurant instead of a banquet space and a bar space. So it's more of a restaurant than previous. But other than that, it's just fixing some of the problems of the past and adapting the kitchen for our uses. And making it look like we want.
And Andre, all the paperwork is now settled with that?
Yes, I believe there's, all the paperwork's been received.
Great. Any other questions? Great, then I will move to approve an ordinance approving the issuance of a Class B2 and a Class B4 liquor license for Hot Taco LLC, doing business as K-Miso at 114 South Washington Street.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Trustee Pashima?
Aye.
Trustee Braden?
Aye.
Trustee Stifler?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher? Trustee Burns?
Aye.
Trustee Banky?
Aye. Yep, which moves us to agenda item 8E, and this is a second read. It relates to the exterior appearance and site plan changes to the property located at 830 North Madison Streets, commonly known as the Salt Creek Club. This matter previously had two plan commission meetings where the plan commission unanimously recommended approval, and at our board meeting in August, there were no material resistance by the board members. I would note that the applicant is requesting approval for the construction of two paddle tennis courts and corresponding lights on top of an existing sports court and construction of a viewing patio. The proposed changes do meet all of the current zoning requirements, including setback, height of the light poles, and the photometric or the light intensity readings of the new lights to be installed. At the Plan Commission meeting, there was resistance from neighbors, specifically two neighbors, in adoption to the opposition of the existing project. I would note that a lot of the opposition, though, were things that were related not specifically to the new lights going in, like time of hours, that they were running equipment, things of that nature, which we reviewed at the last meeting. So with that, is there anyone here from the applicant or any residents that wish to speak on the matter?
We're here on behalf of the applicant. We have the president of the club and one of the members, Pete Koulis from Donatelli and Koulis, on behalf of the applicant. It was well vetted. Bethany and Rob, thank you very much. They came to the site 3 different times. There's 6 conditions. Really, the conditions make it better for the neighbors. And when you hear 2 neighbors, they live in the same house. And their one complaint was about light, where the timers, if the power would go off, the old kind of timers that would be utilized, didn't click back on at the right time. So these are now different types of timers that will automatically go off. So the hard part for them really wasn't at night, is they would come on real early in the morning because the time would be off when the power would kick out. And they'd be on at like 4 or 5 in the morning. So it was the opposite end. All that's been rectified in reality, which this ordinance will make that all better. There were 6 conditions, all agreed upon. That's why it was great to have 2 different meetings, had the people out. The people that are here, the president actually had invited the neighbors on 3 different occasions to come to meetings at Salt Creek. And the main complaints, as Luke pointed out, was noise when there's a big swim meet, where the people are going to park. Everything's been complied with in the past, will continue to be complied with.
One thing I thought that was important here, the lights on the existing paddle courts, on the new lights, they're putting in shields to stop the light pollution from going up. They're going to put those on the old courts.
Correct, so all be added. Great point.
Questions, thoughts?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
We're good. Anybody else on this matter? Okay, hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve an ordinance approving an exterior appearance site plan and site plan for the changes to the property located at 830 North Madison Street, commonly known as Salt Creek Club.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Trustee Pashima?
Aye.
Trustee Braden?
Aye.
Trustee Stifler?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher? Trustee Burns?
Aye.
Trustee Banky?
Aye.
You can start, yeah.
Sure. So this moves us to agenda item number 8F. This is a second read and is a major adjustment to the plan development relative to the relocation of the Hinsdale Community Services Food Pantry from the Memorial Building to the former Humane Society building at 22 North Elm Street. At our last board meeting, it was the general consensus of the trustees and President Colley that we not refer this to the Plan Commission as a major adjustment. We have the vote to move it to a second read, which we did, or move it to the Plan Commission for further consideration. I would note here that this plan development encompasses 10.7 acres and is zoned institutional building on the south side and open space on the north side. Buildings and uses for the development include the former Humane Society, which is the subject building, the police and fire building, water plant, public services, offices and garage, the vacant former youth services building, and village-owned parking lots. Please recall that this matter, as I mentioned before, relocates HCS from the Memorial Building to 22 North Elm. This project will include improvements to the building elevations, construction of a loading area and overhead doors on the west side of the building, landscaping and pavement improvements, including the construction of a sidewalk on the west side of Elm Street, going north and south. And also 7 spots are going to be moved from the east side of Elm Street over to the west side of Elm Street. So 15 previous spots to 7 new spots. And those spots will go from approximately where the building is going north on the property, not all the way up to the corner, however. HCS will operate 2 days per week, on Mondays and Fridays, and they're going to be closed 5 days per week, but they will have workers present on those other days. This was one thing that was discussed at the last meeting, where the hours of operation, curbside grocery pickups on Mondays. It was previously from 3 o'clock, I believe, until 4 o'clock. It's now been moved to 3:45 to 4:45, which is 40 minutes later than when Lane School lets out. So there'll be a 40-minute gap from the time that Lane School lets out until the curbside pickup starts, which was a suggestion from one of the neighbors, which I thought was reasonable. And then on Fridays, the hours will be from 1 to 2 p.m. while Lane School is still in place. You know, the biggest discussion item that we had at the last meeting was the traffic count on Elm and whether or not there should be a 4-way stop sign installed. President Cawley did quite a bit of work on some of the open-ended questions. And Tom, do you want to run through what you determined there?
Yeah, so after last meeting, I put together a list of probably 15 or 20 questions and sent them around to the staff and the police department to get answers to. So that I circulated the answers to the trustees just to get a gauge. And as I said, or as Luke said, most of the issues relating to traffic. So that's what many of my questions related to that. But one of the questions I asked was, while the food pantry was in the Memorial Building, what was the average number of cars that they had at this location? And the average was 65 cars on a Monday and 68 cars on a Friday. So those are roughly the same numbers that are projected for the new location of the food pantry at the Humane Society. And given the history of the food pantry in Hinsdale, we have here in this instance, we have a really good idea of volumes for relocating the food pantry. A lot of times when we get something, a redevelopment or a development, we're guessing as to what traffic will be. I think we can pretty much peg what traffic will be given the fact that the food pantry has already been in existence in this building. So it will be around 60 cars on Monday and 60 cars on Friday.
Just no more than 4 cars at a time.
Right. But I'm just talking about overall usage first. So yeah, the 4 cars at a time would be something that would be part of the ordinance. Then we went back to see if there were any resident complaints while the food pantry was here in the Memorial Building. And as you know, looking across the street, there are houses across the street. So this is really a residential area, and there were no complaints. And as we discussed last meeting, the hospital had a mobile food pantry, which used the same church parking lot where the cars will be queuing for the new food pantry, its new location. And that mobile food pantry discontinued service on June 30th, 2023. And one of the questions I asked is, well, the hospital had its mobile food pantry in operation in this relatively the same location as a new food pantry. What was the level of cars that they saw? And they did car counts on 2 days before the food pantry, the mobile food pantry, discontinued operations at the end of June. They had 74 cars on one day and 63 cars on another day. So, and they had limited hours of distribution too. So relatively the same number of cars, although they won't be going around from Walnut to Elm. It was roughly the same number of cars in the same area. So again, we have seen that. Another question I asked and we got answers for is, when the Humane Society operated out of the Humane Society building, what kind of traffic did they see? And they came back and told us that they had 20 employees who worked and volunteers who worked in 2-hour shifts. And they had, in days of operation, and we had adoption periods, which were relatively discrete periods of time, they had 20 to 50 people per day visiting the building. And they also hosted events like Children's Summer Camp, which brought significant traffic. So there was significant traffic at the Humane Society building while it was being operated by the Humane Society. And I'm not sure that the person we talked to was the director of the Humane Society or somebody who worked there. But their perception, again, this is just anecdotal, is that the traffic at the Humane Society would be heavier than what you'd see at the food pantry when the food pantry is in operation. So I don't, given that at one point the Humane Society was operating there, and at one point there was a mobile food pantry operating within a block of the location we're talking about, and both of them are now gone. I think that this food pantry is not going to contribute to the traffic, and certainly may not even be as great as the traffic was when there was a mobile food pantry and when the Humane Society was in that location. So those are and I'm going to talk a little bit more about, and then we asked, were there any complaints while the Humane Society was in operation, and we saw no complaints about traffic relating to the Humane Society. We had one resident come last time and ask, made the statement that there are no food pantries in residential areas. Well, leaving aside the fact that the food pantry in the Memorial Building is arguably in a residential neighborhood, and the mobile food pantry that the hospital operated was in a residential neighborhood, we looked beyond that into DuPage County generally and found 15 food pantries operating in DuPage County alone that are in residential areas. And moreover, the proposed location, I realize that there are homes on Walnut and on Elm, but directly south of the proposed site for the food pantry is another municipal building, and to the west is a park that backs up to Public Services Department, and then on the east side is the hospital. There are houses to the north, but the food pantry will not be an area that's surrounded by homes, as you know. So, and then as Luke said, the food pantry did agree to modify its hours of operation. Lane School lets out at 3:05. The food pantry is agreed to push their hours to 3:45, from 3:45 to 4:45, which would be 40 minutes after school lets out, which should be sufficient time for kids to walk home. And on Mondays, it'd be from 1 to 2, which shouldn't present any problems. There was also a resident that wrote me an email about the ADA parking on the east side of Elm. And the hospital is very much in favor of relocating the food pantry, and they have 2 ADA parks. If you go to this area of Elm, there's a wall there that on the east side of the street that is adjacent to the doctor's office, and there are 2 ADA parking spaces there, and they're going to add 2 more. So we're going to replace the street parking with parking that's contiguous to the doctor's office on the east side. So there shouldn't be a problem there. So that takes us to what I think, and we can hear from residents, but what I think is that the only real issue that I have seen, I'm allowed to talk to the trustees individually. I'm not allowed to talk to them as a group because that's an open meeting and that violates the Open Meetings Act. So I talk to people individually and get their ideas. And what I try to do here in order to just kind of bring it together is kind of summarize what people have told me, and then we have a basis for discussion. So there are at least 2 trustees that are of the view that we should have a 4-way stop at the intersection of Elm and Walnut, which is just north of where the new food pantry would be. And the reason for that is, I think Trustee Postimo say, on the northeast side of that intersection, there's a wall. Northwest side, there's a wall. And if you're somebody walking across the street or riding a bike, the traffic can be obstructed coming down Walnut Street, and it makes it line of sight difficult for somebody who's crossing the street. And Matt will also say that, while there's only 4 cars per, 4 cars will be let at each time to go to the food pantry, it will be for a period of time a more significant amount of traffic there than you see typically. Now, that's just one other thing. I don't, so I assume everybody else is of the same views, but they may not be. but I never really fully appreciate the number of cars that go on an intersection until you actually look at the data. The average number of cars on Walnut Street each day is 2,500 cars. That sounds like a lot, but that's pretty typical for a residential street. So there are about 200 to 250 cars that go through that intersection of Elm and Walnut per hour. So 200 to 250 cars. And so that, and again, that's pretty typical. I'm not saying that because I think we need a stop sign there. I'm just saying that that's what's there. And if you put traffic meters that basically on, I've always been surprised when you put down counters, the amount of traffic that go through streets that you think are have relatively little traffic. So while I think Matt's right, you will see an increase of traffic. My point is that there's a fairly consistent amount of traffic on that street all the time anyway. But again, that's Matt's view. Matt, I think, is in favor of putting in a four-way stop. Neil is also in favor of putting in a four-way stop, and Neil's, I do this just because I just remember all this stuff. I'm just going to get it out. You guys can tell me if I'm wrong. But Neil's view is that, one, the hospital's right there, and that makes us an unusual area, and people visit the hospital who are not familiar with Hinsdale, and so they may, they may go too fast down that street. The street is at an angle, and when it snows, he thinks it may make sense to have a four-way stop just to keep cars from going too fast down the snowy street. And I also think Neil thinks that the line of sight, because of the angle of the roads, requires a four-way stop. Okay, so that's the pro. The con is Luke. Luke's view is that we have there's a standard that the police department applies for four-way stops, and the reason why they apply the standard is because otherwise you just have no methodology for putting a stop sign. If somebody sends you an email saying I want a stop sign in front of my house, then you can't really say no because we give stop signs out like to everybody. And the standard is that you have to have 5 or more accidents in a 12-month period. Okay, so I think that's called warrants. I'm not sure where that warrants word came from, but I've been hearing it since the 14 years I've been village president. But anyway, you need 5 or more accidents in a 12-month period. We've looked at the data for the intersection of Elm and Walnut for the last 10 years. One year there was 4 accidents, many years ago. Many years there's no accidents. I did the average over 10 years. The average is 1.7 accidents per year, far below the number that would be required to put in a four-way stop. And Luke and the police chief believe you should apply the warrants because otherwise you're going to have stop sign proliferation throughout the village. If you have stop sign proliferation throughout the village, stop signs tend to become less meaningful, and people don't observe them, and they kind of think they're more a suggestion than a rule because there's stop signs everywhere. So those are the pros and cons. And the police chief's suggestion is we separate the four-way stop issue from the zoning issue. We approve the food pantry, have him do studies of that intersection, watch it for a few weeks or months, and if the traffic going from the church on Walnut Street to the food pantry on Elm Street creates a problem, we can address it at that point. So that's his view. And Alexis, I don't think I've gotten your view, but I'm just opening up for discussion now. I hope I didn't mischaracterize what anybody said, but so there's a division, and I think that's the only issue that the trustees have.
Yeah, I would just add, I think Matt and Neil's point about the obstruction, it's probably about a 3.5-foot wall. It's reasonable. It demands to be consideration, which I probably haven't given full consideration to. And then one other point I would note is, not everybody's in favor of stop signs. There's a lot of times
Right.
if they live on a corner or they live a second house in from a corner, you put a stop sign up, cars start to queue and back up and they can't get in and out of their driveway. So as a village, I'm just more, I guess, of a rule follower, thinking let's follow the rules. Let's apply the standards, and if they meet the standards, yes. If they don't, unless there's extenuating circumstances, which may be the case here, then no. Otherwise, we're going to have, we could have neighbors, each one of us telling what to do, and we've got precedent where we've done one or the other. So, said my piece.
Okay.
I think the other thing with the wall too is that there's not a place for someone to stand there
Yes.
that's off of the street.
Well, and the other thing, it can't be seen, right? If somebody's coming
Right.
west to east on Walnut and there's a kid standing by that wall wanting to cross the street, I'm not sure that you would see them.
What happened there? Didn't we used to have a
I don't know,
sidewalk there?
I don't know.
Yeah, Chief King was saying there was like an ADA issue that caused that wall to be put up.
Okay.
But you know, my concern is with the wall up there, what's gonna happen is nobody's gonna go north by going over on the west side of the street and
Yeah.
standing on the street by the retaining wall.
Right.
What's gonna happen is they're gonna have to cross Elm right where people are gonna be turning to get into the food pantry.
Yep, yep, yep. So first, we should hear from residents who want to speak on this. We can take up the issue. Anybody here want to speak? I know there are people from the food pantry. Rather than speaking in favor, is there anybody here who wants to speak against it? Okay. Anybody have any views on the four-way stop sign, for or against? Okay. Cooperative crowd. All right, so, what do we do?
Well,
Why,
I
sorry.
think there's consensus on, I would suggest we follow the chief's recommendation.
Okay, well, you gotta
there's-
talk to these two guys.
There's consensus on the zoning matter.
Right.
Yeah, I'm fine with the zoning.
Yeah.
I would separate out
Yeah.
the
Okay.
stop sign
Yeah.
issue.
Do
Separate issue.
either of you two have a problem with having Chief King study the intersection and come back in a week, or do you feel adamant that we should put in a stop sign now before the food pantry starts operation?
Well, I'm okay with him studying it, but I actually would like him to do it after the pantry is open.
Right,
so
right,
that
right,
we
that's
can
what I mean.
evaluate-
Yes, right,
and-
right,
well,
exactly.
And one of the things that I was wondering about as you were going through, you know, what you had found out, is we obviously have HCS, which is here, right now, and then we have the mobile food pantry, which had its own, clientele, which is now not open, just closed recently, as I understand it.
Right.
So we may actually have twice as many people.
Twice as many people.
In other words, the customers from legacy HCS customers and legacy mobile food pantry customers who are all now gonna be using HCS at the new location.
Right, but I think that they projected their numbers to be 60 cars.
But isn't it 60 of each?
No, I don't think so.
Consolidated.
They consolidated.
They consolidated it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. No, I think it's 60 total,
Okay.
released 4 at a time.
okay,
But if you're okay with separating it out.
yeah,
Allowing a study to be done, and we can put it on the agenda for, a couple months after they're open to see, and maybe you can do a traffic count and,
Yeah, my recommendation or preference would be wait a full 3 months after
Okay.
operation. We'll put
Okay.
counts down. We do have baseline counts now.
okay.
Into trustee Stifler's comment about the side obstruction, I mean, we could kind of vet that out a little better, just to take a look at that.
And we could seek neighbors' input just
Yeah,
on this
yeah,
matter.
Yep. Okay, let's separate it out. Okay,
All right.
anybody else on this? No? Okay.
Hearing nothing and no other input from residents, I'm gonna make a motion to approve an ordinance approving a major adjustment to a planned development relative to the relocation of the Hinsdale Community Services Food Pantry from the Memorial Building at 19 East Chicago Avenue to the former Humane Society building at 22 North Elm Street. And just to be specific and detailed, we will follow up in a 3-month time to independently look at the intersection of Elm and Walnut with regard to a 4-way stop sign.
3 months after the,
3 months after
It's
the
open.
After the CO.
commencement of operation,
yeah.
right?
Thank you.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Second.
Any more discussion? Roll call vote?
Trustee Pashima?
aye,
Trustee Braden?
Aye.
Trustee Stifler?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher? Trustee Burns?
Aye.
Trustee Benke?
Aye. Which moves us to agenda item 8G, and this is a second read, and it relates to the lease agreement between the Hinsdale Community Services and the village for the real property at 22 North Elm Street. The initial lease was executed in October of 22. This amendment addresses changes in the timeline, parking situation, other ancillary matters that have developed over the past 10 months. which I went through in detail at our first meeting. So with that, I'd open it up for questions, comments. Hearing none. Input from residents? Hearing none. I'm missing. Can I get your 8F? Thank you. I'll make a motion to approve a referral of I'm sorry, 8G. Here. Thanks, Matt. I lost one.
I didn't get it either, but that's last.
Was it
last
out of the-
meeting's- Yeah, it wasn't in the packet.
All right.
Just read it off 9. Gee, just read that.
I appreciate it. Approval of a resolution approving and authorizing execution of an amendment to a lease of office distribution space at 22 North Elm Street between HCS Family Services and the Village of Hinsdale.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Trustee Poshma?
Aye.
Trustee Braden?
Aye.
Trustee Stifler?
Aye.
Trustee Fisher? Trustee Burns?
Aye.
Trustee Banky?
Aye.
Thanks. Thank you all for your cooperation and patience. Tollway update.
One item, Mr. President. The Illinois Tollway has announced a long-term closure and detour beginning today through October of the ramp connecting northbound I-294 to eastbound Ogden Avenue. Vehicles will be detoured around the Cloverleaf interchange to access eastbound Ogden, which is expected to increase traffic in the general vicinity. The tollway is asking drivers to use caution and obey detour signage when traveling through the area. Thank you.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah, it is.
I'm-
Yeah. Try to avoid
I avoid
294
it
for the next
completely.
couple of years. Trustee Braden, you want to talk about the 150th and update?
Yes, absolutely. Filling in for Trustee Fisher, an update on the capital campaign. As you know, the Village of Hinsdale is